Do you sometimes feel easily triggered, overly sensitive, or thin-skinned? This could be because you are trapped in a cycle of unmet needs, weak boundaries, and constant resentment. But now comes the thing. Many people can't link this behavior with their biggest struggle. They have a super hard time meeting their own needs and wants. Well, today you have the chance to unlock exactly that. You will understand why you struggle so much to meet your needs and wants, where these feelings of being easily triggered, being overly sensitive, and being permeable actually come from. Hint, it's linked to CPTSD, and I will give you a 3-step solution plan on how to break free from this cycle. Stick with me up till the end today so you won't miss that solution out. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and today we talk about one of my favorite topics, needs. We also have a full class on how to meet your needs, how to communicate your needs on our premium platform. If you want to deep dive more into meeting your needs, go to understandable.net/join, become a member today and get full access to this course on how to meet your needs and other courses on boundaries and emotions as well. Let's start with the basics. What do we mean when we talk about needs? Well, we often think at first about food, water, and shelter, but our needs go far beyond survival. So, what you need to understand first is that we all have basic human needs. So, there is emotional security, there is connection, self-worth. But there are also needs around mental health, like calmness, understanding, that sense to be seen, to be understood, to also have some sense of privacy, okay, to isolate yourself, those kind of things. And then there are relational needs like trust, communication, attachment, and love. And in total, we can distinguish between 6 main categories of basic human needs, which I will show you right now. So I put them in a form of a pyramid. I know there's like the Maslow's pyramid about human needs, but I want to distinguish them a bit more. So on the bottom level, we have the most important needs. And on the top level, we have, well, the least important needs. That means that you just don't need them for survival. So what you have on the bottom of this pyramid are needs related to immediate survival. Those are the basic things that we just talked about: water, food, oxygen, but also safety and temperature. So you need those basic things to make your body function, but you also need safety, okay? That sensation of safety. That's pretty important here already. Then we have extended survival needs. That's like non-contamination, a lack of infection and disease, but also things like sleep, energy, vitality, nutrients, those kind of things is also mostly related to your body and your well-being and comfort. But then we have on level 3, mental health needs. Here we have things like comfort, but also rest, cleanness, understanding, the sensation to be understood, but also some things like having a choice, having a sensation of calmness, an established self-esteem, hope, privacy. Those kind of things that really are important for your mental health and to your well-being up here. And from there on, we have 3 more levels. So then we have relationship-related needs. There we have things such as attachment, authenticity, trust, communication, social interaction, but also things like intimacy and sex, romantic love, and love in general. Those things are often influenced by early trauma, and you may have a disrupted sense for your relational needs if you experience a difficult childhood with a non-supportive environment, with a toxic home, maybe with caregivers who were narcissists, for example. Those kind of things influence your level, and we see that later, on your relational needs. And then we have those 2 top level needs, which are basically not important at all. No, they're fine, they're important as well, but not as important as those basic survival needs that we talked about before. And there is on level 5, satisfaction. Those things are linked to things like stimulation, of not being bored, of having something to do, enjoyment as well, and meaning. And then we have on the top level spiritual needs and values such as truth, learning, achievement, success, reputation, spirituality. Many values are here, and values can be violated as well as your boundaries, for example. You probably won't die when someone does that, but it's still important, and you have this sense of what values are important to you, and therefore you sense that you have a need to protect those values and maybe also your form of self-expression, your spiritual being. Now, those things were basically the needs, but what are your wants? Well, wants are not exactly the same thing as needs. Wants are the things that give life meaning and fulfillment. Those are the things basically on the top level of that pyramid. Those two top levels of the pyramid, satisfaction and spiritual needs such as values or the need for enjoyment, for spiritual growth, those things are your wants. Well, both things, needs and wants, are important, but to distinguish them, a need is anything that you require to maintain your physical, emotional, and financial health, for example, while a want is anything extra. Now, why do we as people with CPTSD struggling so much to meet our own needs? Well, the answer is, as I said already, gave a hint, goes back to childhood. If you grew up in an environment where your emotional or physical needs weren't met, you may have learned early on to suppress your own needs in order to survive. Maybe you were taught that your needs, or what you wanted, what you felt, what you tried to express, weren't important, or were something bad, that you shouldn't have those needs, that expressing them, and you learned that, would get you punished, or that people, your caregivers, criticize or judge you for having those needs, for setting those boundaries, for expressing certain emotions. Then you have an environment where when you as a child grew up there, we call that a toxic home, especially when you have caregivers who are narcissistic, who maybe manipulated you, who neglected you, abandoned you. Those kind of toxic environments, non-supportive, toxic family and home systems created a situation where children often had to hold back their own needs in order to support their parents. So we also talk about the parentification of children quite often. When you had to take responsibility early on, when you had to be there for your mom or your dad because your parents were not being able to re-regulate themselves, or who projected their needs and wants on you as a child, then this is most of the time the outcome. We become people who feel shame around their needs, who feel guilty for expressing their needs. We become people who become people pleasers, who hold themselves back, who don't have the ability to set their boundaries. And those kind of things manifest in attachment styles, or in the attachment style that we as adults continue to live in our own relationships. Now, why is it so important, so incredibly important, to get our needs met? Unmet needs affect our emotional well-being and our relationships as adults. That's for sure. And common signs of unmet needs are things such as frustration, resentment, anxiety, but also depression, because we don't have the ability to live our true and authentic self and our true authentic identity, those things that we actually want to bring out into the world, out of our true core, but we can't because we hold ourselves back. We have those walls of resistance, anxiety, and shame that protect us as a protective mechanism from expressing our needs and setting our boundaries. What you have to understand here is that behind every need, there is an emotion showing up. And behind every emotion, there is a need trying to be met. Now, you could imagine that as an iceberg model. So you have on the tip of the iceberg your triggers. When you react irritated, when you react aggressive or passively aggressive, you're kind of triggered. People say that all the time, oh, that triggered me so much. And yes, it happens. That's the surface level. And below that trigger situation is a whole world of emotions flooding into your body. You might experience that strong sense of anger, that strong sense of resentment or of sadness, of grief, because deep down, and that's what's at the bottom of the iceberg, there is an unmet need behind that sense of dysregulation happening. So basically, your nervous system reacts in a trigger situation when someone, for example, is violating your boundaries or doesn't give you the ability to express a certain need, then your whole central nervous system is dysregulating, is reacting, for example, with a fight response or with a flight response. And behind those reactions within your nervous system, there is just a really, really hurt inner child which hasn't been seen, which hasn't been heard, which hasn't been listened to, and which needs have been unmet maybe for decades. Here is a chart which shows the relation between different emotions and needs, met needs as well as unmet needs. When a need is met, we usually show a positive emotion. When a need is unmet, we show, let's say, an unfavorable emotion. So it could be the case that you're peaceful and calm because your need for relaxation, for sleep, has been met quite well. I slept pretty well last night. I slept 10 hours. Really relaxed today. So I'm more peaceful and calm. I have a lot more capacity, as well as my central nervous system is way more grounded. So I feel also more loving, more connected with myself. I have food in the fridge. I will have lunch in a bit, so I also know that I will be saturated. I'm relaxed here. So I'm glad and happy that I have a bunch of new video ideas here for the channel. So also that need is met here. Now you see, I have a bunch of emotions for these needs that have been met or that I met today. But then there are also those emotions, unfavorable emotions, dysregulating emotions that can occur when your needs are not met. Let's say your partner doesn't see you. You think that your partner is not listening to you, for example, or your partner is violating your boundaries in any other way. Then we see those reactions, madness and being impatient, being sad or overwhelmed, being afraid or nervous, being tired or fatigued. When you work the whole day and your brain starts to getting brain fog, then you will feel tired, will be fatigued, because your whole body craves for regulation, for relaxation. It wants to sleep, it wants to relax, it wants that relief in here. And behind those emotions, there is this need for relaxation, for just laying on the couch, laying in the bed. Maybe you feel overwhelmed sometimes because you met too many people, and then you come home, your partner wants something from you, and you get irritated again. You have a need to isolate yourself, to ground yourself, to calm down, to relax, to make your body calming down. And therefore you react overwhelmed or you react irritated. Behind those emotions, there are always unmet needs. And I guess we all have experienced that quite often. So I want to give you some more examples. Have you experienced before that you get super triggered when someone is violating your boundaries or not meeting your needs? Well, then that is because, as I said, there are unmet needs or missing boundaries, which are quite the same thing, behind that emotional reaction. What you do then, if someone violates your boundaries or if you can't meet your needs, then you might absorb the energy of other people. Because what do? If you don't set the boundary, if you don't prioritize your needs, especially when you already in a state of low capacity, when you're tired, then you prioritize the well-being of others above your own. You therefore neglect your own well-being, and at the end of the day, you're even more exhausted. You feel resentful and frustrated. And this permeability is a direct result of having weak or non-existing boundaries, which is basically a survival mechanism from childhood, as I said, where your needs weren't allowed to take up space. I have that, for example. This sensation of feeling overly sensitive, being super thin-skinned, being easily triggered and feeling permeable is a direct result of having weak or non-existing boundaries. When your boundaries have been violated repeatedly at a young age, your sense of self, so basically where you end and where others begin, can be very blurred, or you don't even have that dimension of your own sense of self. If you don't know how a sense of self for you actually feels like, then you probably don't have that dimension. I haven't had that for a really long time before I understood how I actually feel and where I actually end. It's a pretty difficult concept to explain how a sense of self actually feels. I tried that as well in a course on our platform. But what you have to know is when you have this sense, we do an exercise as well on our platform. I can explain that exercise to you if you don't know how that sense of self actually feels like. What you can do in an exercise is you sit on a chair and then you put a rope on the surrounding ground, on the ground, or a cable, and then you have this circle around you. And what you can do then is try to create awareness for that surrounding space and look how that feels, how you feel in the room, how the space around you feels. Where does this space begin? Maybe where the rope is. And where does it end on your skin? Where does your skin begin? And where do you end the sensation of that body you're in? So if we have never had that sense of self, or if we lost that sense of self, as a result, we often feel disconnected from what we truly need and what we truly want, because we spend so much time focusing on other people's needs. And that's basically a whole big symptom of complex childhood trauma as well. When you grew up in a toxic family system that I just explained, and you try to keep the peace, for example, within your family you grew up in, then you might have learned that prioritizing your own needs meant conflict with your mom and dad, so you pushed them down. You pushed your own needs down and put them on the side so you could focus on the needs of your mom and your dad. And now as an adult, when you're faced with a decision about your own needs, you might still feel confused. You might feel anxious or even guilty for expressing those needs and sensing that need that you have, because you just learned it this way. And this is also part of an insecure attachment style, which you might experience with your partner or with your friends there. I made a full episode about all attachment styles, which I will link to you up here in the description below. There I also explain the insecure attachment style. So you have those needs that you haven't expressed for such a long time, but you want to meet them, but you just can't because you still feel guilty, you feel shame around them. So what can you do? And now I have 3 steps for you that you can walk through in order to get your needs met. Step number 1, identifying and prioritizing your needs. Start by tuning into your body, into your emotions, and try to see which needs are behind the emotions you're feeling. Throughout the day, check in with yourself and ask yourself, how am I feeling? Or what do I need right now? Remember that behind every emotion, there is a need trying to be met. I can do that as well now. I feel a bit tired because I recorded some videos before that one, and I'm a bit hungry as well, so I think I need to get some food in a bit. I see that. That's important, especially in dysregulated states. There it's really important to recognize what you need in those moments when you are triggered, when you're full of resentment, of anger, of grief. Which need is trying to be met in here? If you, for example, feel anxious, you might need safety or comfort. If you feel irritable, you might need rest or space. Then, after identifying your needs, it's time to start prioritizing them. It's okay to put your own needs first, even if it feels uncomfortable, if you feel guilt or shame around expressing that need. You have to practice that quite a lot because shame and guilt will constantly hold you back. I also made a full episode about how to break the cycle of toxic shame and complex trauma. Link that up here in the description below. And by meeting your most immediate needs, whether it's just taking a break, drinking water, in the beginning you can just start to trying to meet your most immediate needs. It's like just taking a break, especially when you're with other people, when you're in the office with your partner, with friends, trying to meet those basic needs first. Taking a break, drinking some water, finding a quiet space. What I often do is, when I'm in a group or with my partner or a friend, I just communicate what I'm doing now. And for me, I just started that a couple of months ago. It makes it way more easy. I just say, I go to the toilet now. I just go into the kitchen now. I just relax for 5 minutes. And I don't know, but by doing this, for me, it just reduces this sense of guilt and shame around those needs. Well, it's easy for the most immediate needs, and that's good because this way you can start practicing to identifying and also communicating your needs. Step number 2, setting clear boundaries. I think we all with CPTSD have a problem with our boundaries, so that's always a good reminder here. And I could not emphasize that enough. It's so important to learn to set your own boundaries. And because it's so important, I also created a full course in our platform. And in our healing journey, we have this pyramid concept. If you go to our website, understandable.net/join, you see that. And we have this 4th level where we talk about, have a full class about setting your boundaries and how to do that. And it's even more important than just communicating needs because it has such a huge impact on the sensation of the self again, on how to understand where I begin and where do I end. If I never practice setting boundaries, I don't have this sensation. And this is why it's so important to set boundaries, also in order to communicate your needs and get a better sensation for that. In the end, setting boundaries is essential for protecting your needs. And if you want to practice that, and I know it's really difficult, you can just start small. Okay, you can start practicing saying no when you don't have the energy or the capacity to meet someone else's demand. Saying no is also just setting another boundary, and it's difficult. I know that. But setting those boundaries, simple words like saying no sometimes, helps us to create space and to meet our own needs and honor them as well. Example, if you feel overwhelmed at work, set a boundary by taking a 10-minute break when you need to recharge. You can also just go to the toilet sometimes and sit there for 5 minutes. I do that sometimes. Hopefully that's not weird. Do you also do that? Let me know in the comments. Step number 3, practice self-compassion. I'm not good in that, honestly. I have a really, really strong critic and someone who's really pushing me hard inside me. So I'm not good in practicing self-compassion here, but it's the 3rd step in that solution plan, and it's definitely worth to remind that. So give yourself grace during this process is basically the fundamental thing here. It's also important to mention that it's quite normal to struggle with unmet needs, especially in the beginning. When you haven't met your needs for a really long time, you haven't set boundaries, then you're in a survival mode because your central nervous system is constantly overwhelmed, is constantly being triggered. And this is why you have this sensation of being overly sensitive and of being exhausted and easily triggered. Be kind with yourself because of this state. When you practice this for enough time, then you will learn how it feels to create this sense of self and how it feels to express those needs. It's basically a new way of living that you just install here. So another thing I'd like to offer you here, a free thing, is when you struggle with emotional dysregulation and you have that problem that you're constantly dysregulated and being easily triggered, I recommend you getting our free workbook as well. We have a full workbook called Re-Regulation Resources. It's a book with a ton of re-regulation tools that I personally learned in therapy. I also have writing techniques for acute dysregulation and an exercise to understand your emotion. You can download it for free. Just go to understandable.net/book, grab a copy now, and start re-regulating today. So now I'm curious, what do you think? Are you also struggling with meeting your needs as a CPTSD survivor? Definitely let me know in the comments. If you want to support this podcast, also leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And I see and speak to you next Sunday, another episode here on the channel. I wish you a great day and remind yourself to get your needs met.